For most of history, humans told ourselves a simple story. We were the chosen ones, the final version, the smartest creature nature ever produced. But for most of our past, we were not alone. There were other humans. Different bodies, different faces, different voices. And one of them was already living in Europe long before we arrived. The Neanderthals. They were not weak. They were not helpless. They were not the stupid cave brutes from old museum drawings. They were stronger than us, built for the Ice Age, powerful enough to wrestle huge animals at close range. And their brains were at least comparable to ours, in some measurements, even larger. So why are we here, and they are behind glass in museums? For a long time, people imagined a simple answer. We were smarter. We arrived, we won, they vanished. But the bones, the tools, and eventually the DNA began telling a much stranger story. Maybe the Neanderthals didn't simply lose. Maybe something far more human happened. For more than a century, Neanderthals had terrible publicity. Artists drew them hunched over, heavy-browed, dragging clubs, barely above animals. The message was obvious. They were strong, but dumb. Modern archaeology destroyed that image. Neanderthals made sophisticated stone tools. They controlled fire. They hunted large animals. They used pigments. They may have made ornaments. They cared for members of their group who could no longer survive alone. Some Neanderthal skeletons show serious injuries, broken bones, damaged joints, missing teeth, wounds that should have made hunting almost impossible. Yet those individuals lived for years. That means someone helped them. Someone shared food. Someone protected them. Someone kept them alive through winters they could not have survived alone. That is not the behavior of mindless brutes. That is a social world. And there is more. At sites like Shanidar Cave, archaeologists have found Neanderthal remains in positions that suggest deliberate burial. The famous idea that flowers were placed in a grave is still debated, but the bigger point is harder to dismiss. Neanderthals were not just leaving bodies where they fell. They seem to have treated death as something meaningful. Maybe not exactly the way we do, but not like animals either. So the old story starts to collapse. If they were strong, adapted, social, and intelligent, then their disappearance becomes even more mysterious. Something happened to them. But it probably wasn't because they were too stupid to survive. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began moving deeper into Europe. But Europe was not empty. Neanderthals were already there. They knew the cold, they knew the animals, they knew the caves, the valleys, the rivers, the places where herds appeared and vanished with the seasons. Then a new kind of human entered their world. Lighter bodies. Different tools, different faces, maybe different sounds. Two human species, standing on the same continent, hunting the same prey. The first meetings could have gone many ways. A group might see smoke from a distant fire and avoid it. Hunters might find footprints that were almost human, but not quite. One band might steal from another. Another might trade stone, meat, or knowledge. There was no single first encounter. There were probably thousands of them. Some peaceful, some tense, some deadly. And that brings us to the darkest possibility. Was this the first great human war? It is tempting to imagine the story as a prehistoric invasion. Homo sapiens arrives, Neanderthals resist, one species destroys the other. And there probably was violence. Both groups needed the same things: meat, shelter, stone, safe places to raise children. A good cave could mean survival. A good hunting ground could feed a group for weeks. If two human groups wanted the same place, conflict was almost unavoidable. Some ancient bones show signs of weapon injuries. Some remains show cut marks. But bones rarely explain motives. A wound does not tell us whether it came from war, hunting accident, personal violence, or something that happened after death. Still, one difference matters. Neanderthals were built for close contact. Their bodies were powerful, compact, heavy with muscle. They often hunted enormous animals at dangerous distances. Imagine trying to kill a bison, or a woolly rhinoceros, or a mammoth, close enough to feel it move. That kind of life leaves marks. Many Neanderthal skeletons show injuries similar to people who survive violent impact. Broken ribs, damaged shoulders, fractured skulls. They were not fragile. They were survivors of a brutal world. But Homo sapiens may have changed the rules. We became increasingly good at killing from farther away. Lighter weapons, thrown spears, later, more advanced projectiles. Instead of meeting strength with strength, we could attack from distance. A Neanderthal was like a wrestler. A Homo sapiens hunter was becoming something closer to a sniper. Not because we were stronger, because we made the fight less fair. So maybe this was the answer. Maybe we won because we killed better. But then, the DNA told a story no battlefield could explain. For decades, people asked the wrong question. Did we defeat them? Did we replace them? Did we wipe them out? Then scientists read the Neanderthal genome and found something shocking. They were not only in caves, they were not only in bones, they were in us. If your ancestors came from Europe or Asia, a small part of your DNA comes from Neanderthals, usually around 1 to 2%. That may sound tiny, but it changes the whole story. Because DNA does not appear through battle, it appears through children. Some Homo sapiens and Neanderthals had families together. Not once, not in one place, but enough times that their genes spread into billions of people alive today. That means some encounters were not raids, not ambushes, not wars. Some were relationships. Maybe temporary, maybe forced, maybe peaceful, maybe something we would recognize as love. We cannot know the emotions, but we know the result. Children were born. Those children had children, and part of the Neanderthal genome survived, hidden inside modern humans. Some of those genes may have helped our ancestors adapt to new environments. Cold climates, different sunlight, new diseases, unfamiliar landscapes. When Homo sapiens moved out of Africa, Neanderthals had already spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to Eurasia. In a strange way, we may have inherited some of their survival tools, not from their weapons, but from their bodies. So the old story breaks again. Maybe Neanderthals were not simply our enemies. Maybe they were also our relatives. But this creates an even harder question. If they became part of us, why did they disappear as a separate people? The disappearance of the Neanderthals was probably not one dramatic event. No single final battle, no one winter, no one cave where the story ended. It was more likely a slow collapse, caused by many pressures at once. First, there were never that many Neanderthals. Their groups were small, scattered, separated by mountains, ice, forests, and enormous distances. That matters. A small population is fragile. One harsh season can kill too many children. One failed hunt can weaken an entire group. One disease can travel through a family line and erase it. For a large population, that is painful. For a small one, it can be fatal. Then the climate kept changing. The Ice Age world was unstable. Forests expanded, then shrank. Grasslands opened, then vanished. Animals moved with the cold. Food sources shifted. The world Neanderthals knew kept rearranging itself. At the same time, Homo sapiens kept arriving, not as one giant army, but as wave after wave of new groups. More hunters, more tools, more fires, more mouths, more pressure. Even if there was no total war, competition could still be deadly. Imagine two groups hunting the same herd. One group has slightly larger networks, slightly longer distance trade, slightly more flexible tools, slightly more people to replace the dead. Over one generation, that difference looks small. Over thousands of years, it becomes enormous. Neanderthals did not need to be stupid to lose. They only needed to be fewer, less connected, and trapped in a world changing faster than their small populations could recover. But even this is not the full ending, because some Neanderthals did not vanish into the ground. They vanished into us. When we hear the word extinct, we imagine a clean ending. The last Neanderthal dies, the species disappears, the museum label is written. But human history is rarely that neat. Some Neanderthal groups probably died out. Some were pushed into smaller and smaller regions. Some lost the competition for food and land. But some met Homo sapiens, had children, and became part of a larger human population. Their separate identity disappeared. Their tools disappeared. Their camps disappeared. Their voices disappeared. But not everything was lost. Their genes continued. In immune systems, in skin, in hair, in small biological details we are still studying. The Neanderthals did not build cities. They did not leave books. They did not carve their own history into stone, but they left something more intimate, a trace inside the bodies of living people. They are gone as a separate human species, but not completely gone from humanity. For a long time, we imagined evolution as a ladder, primitive creatures at the bottom, modern humans at the top, one species replacing the next, until only we remained. But the real story was not a ladder. It was a meeting. Two kinds of humans stood in the same world. They watched the same fires, hunted the same animals, feared the same winters. Sometimes they avoided each other, sometimes they fought, sometimes they learned, and sometimes they had children. So maybe the question is not simply, why did Neanderthals disappear? Maybe the better question is, how much of them is still here? Because if your ancestors came from outside Africa, then part of this ancient encounter is still with you. Not in a museum, not behind glass, not buried in a cave, but hidden inside nearly every cell of your body. The Neanderthals are not only our extinct cousins, they are part of the reason we became who we are.